Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the integumentary system, which is the skin system. So the learning outcomes today are to explain the function of human skin, describe the structure of the epidermis and dermis, and identify the function of the accessory organs associated with the skin. So the integumentary system includes the skin and accessory organs such as hair, nails, and glands. And the function is to protect underlying tissues from trauma, pathogen invasion, and water loss. It also helps regulate body temperature, and it contains sensory receptors such as touch and temperature receptors, which make us aware of our surroundings. So the integumentary system contains all four tissue types. Skin has two main regions, the epidermis and the dermis. And under the skin, there's the subcutaneous layer or the hypodermis. So that's illustrated here. So we have the outer layer, which is the epidermis. And then if you go a little deeper in the skin, you have the dermis. And then below that is the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer. So the epidermis is thin. It's the outermost layer of the skin. And it's made of stratified squamous epithelium. And there's stem cells there that produce new epidermal cells in the deepest layer. And if an injury destroys the stem cells, the skin needs to be replaced. And you can do that in a couple ways. You can do an autograft, which is from another area of the body, or an allograft, which is from another person. And then you can also grow skin in the lab. The epidermis is the cells of the epidermis. There's keratinocytes, which are in the upper layers of the epidermis. These are dead and filled with keratin, and this forms a waterproof barrier. Then we have Langerhans cells, which are a type of white blood cells. And then we have melanocytes, which produce melanin, and these produce skin color and protect from UV light. And people have the same number of melanocytes, but the amount of melanin produced varies. So cells of the epidermis concluded. Other contributors to skin color are keratin and hemoglobin. And epidermal cells produce vitamin D when exposed to UV rays. And vitamin D is important in the regulation of calcium and phosphorus levels in the body. So skin cancer is caused by ultraviolet rays from the sun. And so we're going to talk about two different types of cancer. We have basal cell carcinoma, which is cancer of the epidermal stem cells. This is one of the most common types of skin cancer and is easily curable. And then melanoma is cancer of the melanocytes, which is extremely serious. And so here's an image here showing basal cell carcinoma on the left and melanoma on the right. Okay, moving on to the dermis. This is the thick inner layer of the skin made of dense fibrous connective tissue. And this contains collagen and elastic fibers for strength and elasticity, contains blood vessels, sensory receptors, and glands. And the sensory receptors are specialized for touch, pressure, pain, hot, and cold. The subcutaneous layer is technically not part of the skin, but is composed of loose connective tissue and adipose tissue. And this stores energy, insulates, and protects. Okay, so accessory organs of the skin, we have nails, hair, and glands. So nails offer a protective covering of the digits, so our fingers and toes. And nails grow from the nail root to cover the nail bed. And the cuticle covers the nail root. And then the lanula is this little white half moon shape at the base, which is shown here. So right down at the bottom is this lanula, this little white crescent. And then we have the nail root, where the nail is growing out of, and then this covers the nail bed. Okay, moving on to hair. So hair follicles are epidermal structures that surround the hair itself. And then there's the hair shaft, the portion of hair protruding from the skin. And the color of hair comes from melanin, and as melanocytes age, they produce less pigment and hair turns gray. And then the erector pili muscles are attached to the hair follicle, and these can contract to extend the hair and this creates the feeling of goosebumps. Okay, accessory organs of the skin concluded. So we have the oil glands, the sebaceous glands, which produce sebum, which soften the hair and skin. It also prevents bacterial growth, and acne is actually the inflammation of the sebaceous glands. And then we have the sweat glands, or the sudoriferous glands, which are in the dermis, and their ducts open onto the skin surface, and these help regulate body temperature. Okay, moving on to organ systems, body cavities, and body membranes. So the learning outcomes here are to summarize the function of each organ system in the human body, identify the major cavities of the human body, and name the body membranes and provide a function for each. So an organ is a group of tissues performing a common function. Groups of organs with a similar function form an organ system. Some of these organ systems, like for example, the respiratory system, occupy specific cavities. Others, for example, the muscular system, are found throughout the entire body. And organs and cavities are lined with membranes, many of which secrete fluid. So here's all the organ systems of the body. So we have the integumentary system, which protects the body, provides temperature homeostasis, synthesizes vitamin D, receives sensory input. And the example here is skin. Then we have the cardiovascular system, which is a transport system for nutrients and waste, provides temperature control, pH control, and fluid homeostasis. And this organ is the heart. The lymphatic and immune system defends against infectious disease, provides fluid homeostasis, assists in absorption and transport of fats. And so our organs here are lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, and the spleen. The digestive system, it ingests, digests, and processes food, absorbs nutrients, and eliminates waste, and involved in fluid homeostasis. So here we have the oral cavity, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, the salivary glands, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. And the respiratory system, we exchanges gases at both the lungs and tissue. It assists in pH homeostasis, and the organs there are the lungs. Then we have the urinary system, which excretes metabolic waste. And this provides pH and fluid homeostasis. And the organs there are kidneys and the urinary bladder. Okay, then we have the skeletal system, which provides support and protection, assists in movement, stores minerals, and produces blood cells. So the organ there would be the bones. Then we have the muscular system, which assists in movement and posture and produces heat, and those would be the muscles. Then we have the nervous system, which receives, processes, and stores sensory input, and then provides motor output, and then also coordinates organ systems. So this would be your brain and your spinal cord. Then we have the endocrine system, which produces hormones, coordinates organ systems, regulates metabolism and stress responses, and it also involved in fluid and pH homeostasis. And the organs there are the testes, the ovaries, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the thymus, the thyroid, and the pineal gland. Then lastly, here we have the reproductive system, which produces and transports gametes or sex cells and nurtures and gives birth to offspring in females. And so the organs there are the testes, penis, ovaries, uterus, and vagina. Okay, so moving on to body cavities. There's two main cavities. We have ventral and dorsal. So the ventral cavity is split up into three. We have the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities. And the thoracic and abdominal cavities are separated by the diaphragm. And then the dorsal cavity contains the cranial cavity and the vertebral canal. Okay, so that's illustrated here. So again, we have the dorsal cavity, which has the cranial and vertebral cavity. And then we have the ventral cavity that is the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities. Okay, so the thoracic cavity contains the esophagus, heart, and lungs. The abdominal cavity contains digestive and other organs, and the pelvic cavity contains reproductive and other organs. So body membranes line cavities and the internal space of organs and tubes that open to the outside. So there's 4 types. There's mucous, serous, synovial membranes, and the meninges. So the mucous membranes line the tube of the digestive, respiratory, urinary, and reproductive systems. And these are composed of epithelium overlying loose fibrous connective tissue. And these contain goblet cells that secrete mucus. And the serous membranes, these line closed cavities not open to the environment and cover the surface of the organs contained within. So that is the pleurae lines the thoracic cavity and cover the lungs. The pericardium forms the pericardial sac and covers the heart. And the peritoneum lines the abdominal cavity and covers its organs. Okay, synovial membranes composed of only loose connective tissue, the line free moving joints, and they secrete synovial fluid for lubrication. And then the meninges are composed only of connective tissue, and these are in the dorsal cavity around the brain and the spinal cord. And meningitis is inflammation of the meninges. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and then homeostasis. Define homeostasis and provide an example. Distinguish between positive and negative feedback mechanisms. Okay, so homeostasis is a relatively constant internal environment, and there are various conditions in the body that are maintained within a relatively narrow range of normal values. So that is blood glucose, pH, body temperature, and if conditions vary too much, illness results. Okay, so the internal environment has 2 parts, blood and interstitial fluid. So blood delivers oxygen and nutrients to the tissues and carries away carbon dioxide and waste. Interstitial fluid surrounds body cells, substances are exchanged through it, and body systems work together to keep these substances within the range of normalcy. So the body systems and homeostasis, the nervous and endocrine systems coordinate the other organ systems. So the nervous system is faster, but the effects of the endocrine system last longer. The endocrine system secretes hormones, which are chemical messengers that travel in the blood. So we're going to go through all the organs, systems that contribute to homeostasis. So the nervous system regulates and coordinates the activities of all the other system. It responds quickly to internal and external stimuli. The cardiovascular system transports oxygen and nutrients to tissue cells and transports waste away from cells, and also transports hormones secreted by the endocrine glands. Then we have the digestive system, which supplies blood with nutrients and water for tissue cells and rids the body of non-digestible remains. Then we have the muscular system, which produces heat that maintains body temperature and protects and supports internal organs. Then we have the endocrine system, where the endocrine glands secrete hormones, which also regulate and coordinate the activities of other systems. And this one works more slowly than the nervous system, but again, lasts longer. Then we have the respiratory system, which supplies blood with oxygen for tissue cells and rids blood of carbon dioxide, helps regulate the acid-base balance of the blood. Then we have the urinary system, which excretes nitrogenous and other waste. It regulates water salt balance of the blood, helps regulate the acid-base balance of the blood. Then we have the lymphatic system, which helps maintain blood volume by collecting excess interstitial fluid and returning it via lymphatic vessels to the cardiovascular veins. And this helps defend against diseases. Then we have the integumentary system, which helps maintain body temperature and protects internal organs. So there's a lot of homeostasis going on in the body. So mechanisms for maintaining homeostasis are through negative and positive feedback. So negative feedback is, there's two primary mechanisms used in the body. So it has two components. You have a sensor and a control center. So the output of the system turns down or off the production, for example, like a furnace. And this is another example of how temperature regulation works. Okay, so that's summarized here. So we want to be at just the right level at homeostasis. So if there's too much or too little, we have some stimuli that is picked up by a sensor, and this sensor sends data to the control center, and the control center directs response to the stimuli that outputs some effect, and this effect has a negative feedback on the amount to return it back to normal. And so an example here is for your furnace. So if it's too hot, you have a sensor that recognizes that, sends data to the thermostat, which turns off the furnace, and this is negative feedback to have the temperature at the right level. And then the same thing is if it's too cold, the sensor will pick that up, send it to the control center, and this will turn the furnace back on such that there's negative feedback in returning to normal temperature. Now, if you take that analogy and apply it to the body, the stimuli is picked up by a sensor in the brain, and this sends data to the control center also in the brain, where you want to maintain body temperature at 98.6. So this will direct a response, and instead of a thermos turning on, you'll have your blood vessels dilate and your sweat glands secrete such that you cool down to normal body temperature. And in contrast, on the other hand, if it's too cold, it's the same sensor in the brain, and it sends data to the control center. Again, you want to be at that 98.6. And this directs response to stimuli, which will constrict the blood vessels, inactivate the sweat glands, and then shivering may occur. And this would be negative feedback to normal body temperature. Okay, so the last thing here is positive feedback. So it brings about a change in the same direction as the original stimuli. So this is example here is childbirth. So the fetus head pushes against the cervix, which stimulates signals that are sent to the brain. The brain then secretes the hormone oxytocin, which causes stronger contractions, and this causes more oxytocin to be released. So childbirth stops the positive feedback, and this can actually be pretty harmful in some situations because it can lead to a fever. Okay, so that's all I have for today. Are there any questions? All right, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good day.
Thank you.